Welcome to the EMS Expense Approval course. Over the next several minutes, we will show you how to access and navigate within the new version of EMS, our online submission system. This class will provide a brief overview of EMS, describe the approver's roles and responsibilities, review pertinent travel and expense policies, orient you to the application, and walk you through the expense approval process. Finally, we will talk about the support you will receive as you begin approving expense reports. This course is designed to provide Yale employees with the skills and knowledge required to manage university expenses in a manner that adheres to Yale's financial management principles. The three guiding principles are setting up for success, getting it right the first time, and managing smart. Let's begin this first module by getting you more familiar with the application. Our goal is to identify the key features and roles in EMS. The previous EMS, Concur, is no longer available for use. The new EMS is a web-based Oracle application that's used to enter, process, and approve faculty, staff, and student employee expense reports. EMS is integrated with Yale's financial system and lowers the overall cost to the university. As an approver, EMS has several helpful features to make your job easier. There is a built-in workflow to approvers for organizations charged on the expense report. Additionally, you will have the ability to approve expenses based on the threshold-based approval level of $1,000 or $10,000. Expense policies and procedures are also integrated in the system. This makes the approval process more efficient, as preparers must attach the necessary supporting documentation for required expenses before you receive their report. Preparers will not attach receipts for expenses under $75. A missing receipts exception is also built in. Finally, you will be able to transfer expense reports to other approvers and will receive HTML formatted email notifications. There are several roles specific to the expense management process. The initiator, the person who incurred the expenses, has the option to either complete the expense report, him or herself, or delegate it to the preparer. There are two types of preparers. The transmittal preparer is responsible for filling out the expense report transmittal form on behalf of the initiator and providing it to the transaction preparer, who will enter the expenses into EMS. The approver reviews the details of the report and then decides whether to approve the report, reject the report, or initiate a change. Logging into EMS is simple. You will access it from the U portal and use your NetID and password. Then choose Internet Expenses from the menu within the application. When you log in, you will check for expense reports that are awaiting your approval. After logging into EMS, the Expenses homepage displays. From here, you can create an expense report, track submitted reports, update a report, and view notifications. The notifications section is where, as an approver, you will see expense reports that need to be reviewed and approved. The expense report detail screen contains important information about the expense report. In the General Information section, you will find the name of the person the expense report is for, the cost center, business purpose, a link to required documentation, as well as the report total. You will see 5 tabs in the middle of the screen where you will be able to view expense allocations and a weekly expense summary. These tabs will be covered in greater detail during the demonstration. The Expenses section of the Expense Lines tab shows all credit card and cash expenses, as well as whether a receipt is required for each expense. The summary section at the bottom of the page shows the expense report total and total reimbursable amount. At the top of the screen, you will see the navigation bar, which allows you to search for expense reports, credit card transactions, and payments. In addition, you can select or remove people who are able to enter expense reports for you under Access Authorizations. Now I'll walk you through a short demonstration of how to log in and navigate within EMS. Click play to begin the demonstration. Click the EMS link from the U-Portal. You will log in via the CAS system by entering your NetID and password and then clicking Login. Select the Internet Expenses link. Scroll down to the Notifications section of EMS. Click the drop-down menu next to Open Notifications to see a variety of options. All notifications, FYI notifications, notifications from me, open notifications, and to-do notifications. Select To-Do Notifications and click Go. Check the expense report you would like to view and click Open, or click on the link under the subject column for the desired expense report. Summary information for the chosen expense report displays on the screen. In addition, the expense report details page provides additional details about each expense. This completes the Introduction to EMS module. You should now have a good overview of the EMS application, including benefits to both the university and the approver. In addition, you should understand how to log in and navigate within the application. Now that we've familiarized you with EMS, including its benefits and how to log in, it's time to turn our attention to the travel and expense policies. At the end of this module, you should understand Yale's travel and expense policies and procedures to ensure a compliant approval process. To maximize Yale's resources, the travel and expense policies and procedures provide specific guidelines for use of university funds. All initiators, preparers, and approvers should be adhering to the information outlined in these documents. There are several policy changes that are important for you to know. First, all expense reports under $200 will automatically be approved by the initiator. This means that once the preparer has submitted the expense report, it will be routed for approval to the initiator. When he or she verifies that the expenses are accurate, additional approvals will not be required. Please note that both the QA Compliance Unit in the Controller's Office and business offices will be reviewing expense reports that are under the $200 threshold to ensure compliance. Second, personal expenses incurred while traveling on university business will not be reimbursed. See Guide 3301 GD.01 for a list of miscellaneous non-reimbursable travel expenses. In addition, certain expenditures must be categorized using the expense type unallowable. Alcohol charges on business meals no longer need to be allocated as unallowable unless the expenses are being charged to grant funds. It is important to note that per Policy 3201, due to safety standards for the university, furniture and fixtures must be purchased through SciQuest with our contract vendors or through purchasing services. Also, according to Policy 3220, purchase of restricted items, You may not use a credit card to purchase any of the restricted items. Violation of policy may result in appropriate disciplinary action. Finally, for expenses under $75, receipts are not required. When receipts are necessary, please use one of the 3 methods outlined on the screen to scan or fax the documentation. Please note that once the receipts are attached using one of the 3 processes above, the original receipts and cover sheets should be retained for 90 days after the end of the month in which the reimbursement took place. After the 90 days, the receipts should be shredded. Based on Policy 3301, all expense reports and supporting documentation should be submitted within 10 business days of incurring the expense or returning from the trip, whichever happens later. Approval should be completed within 7 calendar days from the date of receipt from the preparer. To reduce errors, there are a number of items you will need to check for when reviewing an expense report as outlined on the screen. For example, you want to be sure the name of the payee is correct, that there are no missing item descriptions, and that all the pertinent documentation is included. When these items are overlooked by an approver, they will be rejected by AP and returned for rework. Your attention to these important details on the front end makes the expense reimbursement process more efficient for all parties. To learn more details about the key changes, click on the policies below. Be sure to review the key points on this slide. Let me point out an exception to the under $200 initiator-approved expense reports. If a receipt is required and is missing, the expense report will be routed for approval to the appropriate business office. On this slide, there are 2 important points that haven't been previously mentioned. First, the university does not provide reimbursement for travel and entertainment expenses of family members and others who accompany university employees on business. In addition, travel funded by federally sponsored grants and contracts is generally subject to the Fly America Act, stating that air travel must be booked on a U.S.-flagged air carrier. Regarding air travel, any international flight less than 5,000 miles one way must be booked in economy class with the lowest fare. For international flights over 5,000 miles one way, the traveler may book a business class ticket if funds are available and approved by the business office. Regarding lodging, please note that based on IRS regulations, a traveler who is visiting in a city, town, or state for more than 30 days is considered a resident of the state, and reimbursement rules change. In this case, one would only be eligible to receive up to 50% of the current published federal per diem rate for the location or the actual cost, whichever is less. Similar to lodging per diem, reimbursement of actual meal and incidental expenses for business trips greater than 30 days will be available at 50% of the current published federal per diem allowance for that location. In addition, regarding group meals, the cost of group meals should be $100 or less per person, including tax and tip. Pre-approval of meals in excess of $100 per person is required. This completes the Travel and Expense Policies and Procedures module. You should now have a solid understanding of the changes in travel and expense policies and understand the items you need to pay attention to during the approval process. Now that we've introduced you to EMS and reviewed pertinent T&E policies and procedures, let's review how an expense report gets approved. After completing this module, You will be able to understand the approval process, identify the levels of approval, complete the steps required to approve an expense report, recognize the different actions available to approvers, and delegate your approval responsibility to another approver. The EMS approval hierarchy routes transactions according to dollar amount and organizations charged. As an approver, you will receive expense reports ready for approval when the preparer has entered all expenses into EMS and all required documentation has been submitted, loaded, and linked to the expense report. When approving expense reports, use the checklist displayed on the screen to ensure important requirements have been met. Now, let's shift gears and talk about approval levels. Reports greater than or equal to $200 in absolute value will require approval. Approval routing is determined based on the total dollar amount of the expenses charged to the organization. Each organization has a list of valid approvers with established signing limits. These approvers are responsible for approving transactions charged to the org up to that signing limit, $1,000 or $10,000. Your options are to approve, reject, transfer, or request information. Let's take a closer look at the responsibilities for a $0 reviewer. The most important task is to ensure the expense report complies with the travel and expense policies and procedures. In addition, the reviewer must ensure the report has the correct PTEO and necessary supporting documentation. Finally, it's important to review any restricted funds to ensure compliance. Let's review the 4 types of actions an approver can take when reviewing an expense report. First, it can be approved. Second, the approver can reject it. If that's the case, details should be provided for the preparer who will need to fix it. Please note, approvers do not have the ability to edit reports in iExpense as people were able to do in the old EMS. Third, the approver can transfer the report to another person. The final option is for the approver to request additional information from the preparer. Since you already know how to log in and what the T&E policies are, let's take a look at how to approve an expense report. Click play to begin the demonstration. When action is needed to approve an expense report, you will receive notification via email. This screen shows the expense approval email. A summary page for the employee's expenses displays, including the due date of the expense report, the person for whom the expense report is being processed, and the cost center or organization to which the expenses will be charged. Scroll down and click the Expense Report Details link. Enter your NetID and password, and then click the Login button. The Expense Report Details page displays, showing information about each expense, as well as providing a link to attached receipts. The Expense Report Details screen contains 5 tabs. The default is Expense Lines, which shows a listing of all credit card and cash expenses. You will learn about the other 4 tabs in subsequent slides. Scroll down to view more information and review the expenses for compliance based on the T&E policies and procedures. Be sure to use the checklist provided. Perform a review of the expense line item totals at the bottom of the page. Click View to view all attachments associated with the expense report. Click on each file name to review the required documentation that has been attached to the expense report. After viewing all required documentation, click the Return to Expense Report link. Next, click the Expense Allocations tab. The Expense Allocations tab shows the PTAO for each expense. The Weekly Summary tab shows a weekly summary of all expenses by expense type. The Approval Notes tab shows notes that have been entered by previous approvers. The Approvers tab shows a listing of all approvers in the order they will approve the expense report. Click Return to return to the main page. Once you are satisfied that the expense report complies with Yale's policies and procedures, click Approve to approve the expense report. To reject an expense report, click the Reject button. If you are rejecting an expense report, scroll down to the Notes section and indicate why you are rejecting the report. One of the changes to policy is that approvers will not review expense reports under $200. Instead, they will be reviewed during the QA process. This will make the approval process more efficient as well as reduce the amount of work for approvers. If mistakes are found on an expense report, corrective action will be necessary. The table includes many issues that may be identified on expense reports under $200. How the mistake is found, the resulting corrective action, and the person responsible for resolution. For example, incomplete documentation is uncovered through either the QA or internal audit review process. The problem is corrected by providing the missing documentation. This demonstration will show you how to delegate your approval responsibilities to another approver. Click Play to begin the demonstration. At the bottom of the Expenses homepage, you will see two links, the Vacation Rules link and the Worklist Access link. The Vacation Rules feature is used for delegating your approval responsibility. The Worklist Access feature allows you to specify which users can act upon your notifications. In this exercise, we will be using the Vacation Rules feature. Click the Vacation Rules link. Click Create Rule. Select All as the item type and click Next. Select a start date and end date for the rule. Search for and select the name of the person who will act as your approver. Click Apply. The vacation rule has now been created. You are now able to update or delete the rule. At the beginning of the course, we introduced Yale's financial management principles. As a review, the 3 guiding principles are setting up for success, getting it right the first time, and managing smart. The details on the screen illustrate examples of each principle. The new EMS will make the approval process more efficient, as well as provide you with additional features to ensure accurate reports are submitted with all of the required information for approval. This completes the expense approval module. You should now be able to understand the approval process. Identify the levels of approval. Complete the steps required to approve an expense report. Recognize the different actions available to approvers and delegate your approval responsibility to another approver. Now that we've shared everything you need to know about the expense approval process in EMS, it's time to turn our attention to support that's available once you're ready to approve expense reports. To make the transition to the new approval process as smooth as possible, 2 resources are available to you: End User Support and Quick Guides. End User Support is available via the ITS Help Desk by calling or emailing. A series of quick guides have been created to assist you with expense report approvals. They can be found at the Yale Business website. Click on the link below to access the quick guides. Congratulations! Now that you have completed this course, you should be able to understand why Yale is replacing the current EMS. Comply with Yale's travel and expense-related policies. Understand the approval process. Complete the steps required to approve an expense report. Identify the levels of approval. Use additional EMS features, and recognize the available support resources. Now it's time to begin the quiz.